As we sit here, someone has just taken their last breath. That may be your sister, your brother, your uncle, aunt, friend, and even your own child. Our fundamental right to live in an environment that is not harmful to our being has been compromised by the extractive industries for profit that is continuously destroying our biodiversity. Mangwanani, Tobel. Good afternoon, friends, comrades, and fellow travelers on the Just Transition Road to a world based on climate justice. All protocols observed. A big thank you to Trust Africa and the other team members for bringing us together to such a beautiful space and connecting us with one another. Thanks to Owen and Ellen from the Wallace Global Fund for supporting some of us to be part of this gathering. It is an honor to be part of this gathering together with inspirational comrades. Some of them are going to be on the panel who have been driven by a pinch of madness, by injustice, and put their lives on the line, striving to act and make the world a better place to live in. I've been asked to reflect on climate justice, climate change, just transition, and green resources. At the outset, dear friends, let us be blunt with each other and call a spade, as we were asked to do yesterday by some of the keynote speakers. Firstly, green resourcing is a term we in Africa have never, ever used. Our lives and the earth we live within in Africa, which we have done in harmony for millennia, have never been viewed through greening the world. This is a Northern corporate-led articulation to deflect away from the reality of colonial corporate plunder. We have and we continue to strive to live in relations of solidarity and equity with each other and in non-degrading and positive relationships with the world around us. For us, this is environmental justice. It is about a set of relationships that our friends in Zimbabwe so thoughtfully encapsulate in their word, ukama, which in Shona means a person in relation to other human beings and the universe. So it is fitting that I have been asked to be in front of you today. Secondly, when we speak about climate justice, we need to do this in the context of the ecological debt that the North owes the world, and especially the global South. If we do not challenge this critical issue of restorative justice, then climate justice will be a mirage and an ever-warming Africa. Just transition is more than just energy transition. It is about ensuring that we deliver on another world that is possible, necessary, and that must be delivered upon. A transition must be based on a set of principles of inclusivity, solidarity, open democratic debate and decision-making, and that considers class, race, and gender, and also with an environmental lens. From a climate perspective, it is about system change and not climate change. We need to work towards a world that we have in common and not a world where extractivism sees Africa as a big hole which they can just continue to exploit. Let us remember, as we say within the climate justice movement, leave the oil in the soil, the coal in the oil, and the gas under the land. Are we going to be shouting the same slogans for the mineral needed for the alternative energy soon? At the rate of plunder and damage of our land by major corporations and governments from the US to China, I see a world where I'm studying with and making the same demands with the people who live next to the mines for these minerals across Africa. Let's make sure a transition speaks to African realities, which starts with people needs first. And we can speak about renewable energy for whom? For whom is the question when we consider our opening plenary yesterday that spoke about the pathway and pace of the transition that we have to undertake globally. How do we do this in a manner that is globally agreed and that responds to the needs of the people and the poor first and deals with the gender challenges we have today? We always have to ask ourselves about the actions we take for whom. The new energy and focus of our giving must be to focus on climate change and the just transition based upon gender challenges and the inequality that is so evident to us. I hope this is what was also resonating in yesterday's discussions. So yesterday's opening sessions were such a perfect platform for the discussion we are having alongside Musiwa Tunya, the thundering smoke of the falls. And from the thundering smoke of the falls, there's so much ancient wisdom around here. And this is what we can learn from, that we can deduce from, and review and also infuse our philanthropy around some of the ancient wisdoms. Musiwa Tunya is an example of what is possible and what has been there, what is currently here, and what we can still have in the future. And I think this is where philanthropy has also to focus on. From the opening, Halima Mohammed called for a system change and good governance, asking what a just society needs and how do we support the agency of the people. And the ever important question, for whom? We were warned by Tade Aina, what happens if you let people go hungry? The new frontier, Dr. Tulani says, for African philanthropy, it's about climate change. I want to thank them for their reflection, as these reflections would carry through all the philanthropy review as to what needs to be done and what needs to be done for whom. Currently, the global average temperature for the 12 months, July 2023 to June 2024, is the highest on record, at 0.76 Celsius above the 1991 till 2020 average, and 1.64 Celsius above 1850 to 1900 pre-industrial average. The magic climate mark of 1.5 degrees is gone. Other commitments made in the Paris Agreement gone. No matter what happens, we are in a transition, be it to a better world or more unstable world, but a world we have to share in common. And that means philanthropy needs to understand giving in the context of building a world we can all share in common. Let us remember Tade Aina's warning, because coupled with threats from climate change, extremism, and epidemics, we are in a challenging next century. But we, as Africans in this room, can respond differently and respond with our African humanity, which we have had so often in these past days. And I hope all of us who are going to make a reflection, a review as to how we conduct ourselves and go back to living in that humane way. Let's embrace and live in solidarity and leave no one on the trash heap of greedy systems that are elitist and selfish. How do we respond to the push for renewables is what I want to reflect upon, then conclude with articulations and practical vision of what can be done. Over the last years, a group of non-governmental organizations from Africa, Asia, Europe, and globally thought hard about what a push for renewable energy globally is going to mean to people on the ground. Is it going to repeat the extractive model that laid destruction to people, their lands, and the planet, that has left us with plant-abundant places and concentrations or sinks or hazardous materials and destructive practices that are in turn sources of group differentiated vulnerabilities to premature death, which whether state sanctioned or extra legal is how racism works. According to civil rights activist, author, geographer Ruth Wilson Gilmore in Forgotten Places and the Seeds of Grassroots Planning. After a deep discussion and consultation across various networks and geographies, we developed a set of principles and parameters, or what we'd call guardrails, for safe, clean, and renewable energy systems aimed at addressing concerns, challenges, risks, and possible harm, not just in the process and requirements of the building of the new system, but also in the key elements of our common vision of these systems from the national level to the global level. A common vision that will build a common world, a world we share in common. The principles that we had are the principles that in our endeavors for a new energy system to deliver a just or real just transition. Some of the principles, I may not go through all of them, I'll pick some, and I think people can go to the websites of the organizations that I will share at the end to find more material. One of the principles is that addressing energy poverty and ensuring the right to universal, gender just, and equitable access to sufficient energy for basic needs. We feel that was one of the principles that we came together and discussed that. Building democratic and efficient energy systems where we say people have got the right to decide what form of energy they would want to have. And we know, obviously, people on the ground, they would resort to locally or socially owned renewable energy that is going to improve their life and has got less carbon emissions. The bigger principle, the principle that we had at the top, was upholding and protecting basic human rights, the rights of indigenous people and affected communities, workers' rights, well-being, women's rights, gender rights, children and youth rights, and human rights for environmental defenders. One of the principles based on the threat against particularly human rights defenders or environmental justice activists is that of safety and security. And we felt that this is one of the principles that are important of safety and security of people on the front lines or around who are on the coal face of renewable energy minerals extraction. One of the principles was also around the protection of biodiversity, and that we also need to be cautious of low carbon energy sources with potential and actual harm to people, communities, and ecosystem. We may be raising our voices and say we need a greater investment in renewable energy technologies, would want a divestment against fossil fuels, but we must also remember that at the core of the minerals for renewable energy technologies, there's also issues of land, there's also issues of protection of biodiversity, there's also issues of those who are the keepers or those who are continuously protecting our biodiversity, and at the forefront it's women, particularly in this continent, because they are the ones that are keepers of sacred sites, they are the carriers of ancient wisdoms, and their protection is quite important. In South Africa, in collaboration with the Life After Coal, which brings together 3 environmental justice organizations in the country, Earth Life Africa, which I belong to, Groundwork Friends of the Earth, where Comrade Bobby comes from, and the Center for Environmental Rights. With communities on the front lines, we had developed a practical approach to a just transition, grounded in a just transition from coal and other fossil fuels to a society based on clean, just, and renewable energy for social justice. And the issues which are not far different from the principles that I've just mentioned, we work on the issues on a new sustainable energy system to replace the current system based on dirty fossil fuels that only serves the elite, the end of financing coal and other fossil fuel investments, including gas and oil, the rehabilitation of land and water ruined by coal mining. We also working around issues or also integrating issues around transport and communication systems that are inclusive and enable all to take part in public debates and decision making. We also are working on issues around open democracy as the basis for decision making with a special focus on the gender lens. And in that, we are aware that within the coalface of extractive industries, the resistance in different localities, you find women at the forefront. And thus, women, besides whether there has been the Paris Agreement or the UNFCCC, women have been at the forefront of protecting, of ensuring that life goes on, of ensuring that there's food security, of ensuring that there's a balanced community, ecological, or environmental management in the areas where they are. In this, yesterday, we recognize, as mentioned yesterday, that systematic change requires an indigenous agenda spanning over 20 to 30 years with discipline and a balance of bottom up to down. So I think it's time that we have to go down and start working. I also would like to reflect on the Bridgespan report on philanthropy, which was presented at the academic gathering. It was alarming to see stats that 2% of African philanthropy spent is on climate change, and the global philanthropy spent is 22%. But we have to unpack this stat, looking at it through the lens of a just transition. Thus, responding to infrastructure, water, healthcare, not respond to climate change. We need to rethink how we understand funding and how we interconnect funding. I would like to make an open invitation to all philanthropy foundations and institutions to work and learn with us, to support local community-based organizations rather than NGOs who may not speak of an amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere that needs to be reduced, local community organizations who may not have academic and Western science speak, local community organizations who may not speak NGO language. Their language is about how they should protect their cultures and traditions embedded in nature around them. The local community-based organizations' language is how do we preserve food in case there's droughts, in case there's flooding, how do we prepare ourselves for that? And that is a community, collective decision making. It's not a decision that comes from anywhere. And this is where support is needed. Just to quote Mary Robinson, one of the elders, and thanks Mama Krasha here as part of the elders is here, and I would suspect that this statement was coined collectively by yourselves. So Mary Robinson here says, women are at the front lines of action to address climate change, and their critical contributions need to be supported. Climate action and funding can also exacerbate the challenges women face and undermine their rights if they are not responsive to women. Those are the words of Elder Mary Robinson. And I think she echoes, this is the message that I'm sending to this gathering. This is a message that I think needs to resonate as you reflect, think about this quote, and in your response, I think you shall have justice to the world, to Africa, if you really support women-led initiatives. There's also other initiatives around supporting local organizations. In South Africa, through discussions and also listening to a number of partners and also local community-based organizations, there has been an establishment of an environmental justice fund that is pool funding, supporting grassroots organizations who are at the coal face of extractives around coal, oil and gas. And this funding, this pool funding, has actually contributed towards strengthening a movement for protection of fundamental human rights. We'd also recommend that our call not only remain with you as African philanthropists, our call should be taken out to other grant makers worldwide. We know there's a lot of them. If this message could also be sent to them. I work for an NGO, and I know that there's a lot of work needs to be done. But however, we're not reaching everyone. But if you reach out to local community-based organizations, particularly those that are women-led and those that are working around a transition, actually people are not saying it's a just transition. It's how they live on an everyday basis, how they change their lives, and how they build a much more equitable and just society. Thank you. Amandla! Amandla!